The Haftarah of the first day of Pesach is from the book of Yoshua, the book of Joshua, and discusses the bringing of the first Korban Pesach, the first Passover sacrifice, in the land of Israel. The Jews just crossed over the Jordan River. There was this great miracle at the Yarden, at the Jordan, where the water was stopped. There was water on one side, a whole wad of water, and the Jews crossed on dry land. And then when they came over, they came into Eretz Yisrael, and this was in the beginning days of the month of Nisan. And coming up was Pesach. And then they had to bring the Korban Pesach. But they were uncircumcised, because they didn't circumcise themselves during the desert. That's a different issue for different reasons. But the point is they also knew that they could not bring the Korban Pesach unless they were circumcised, because an uncircumcised individual is not allowed to participate in the Korban Pesach. So therefore, the first thing they did when they crossed over the Yarden was to circumcise themselves. And then, a few days later, they were able to bring the Korban Pesach. However, there's an interesting term that's used regarding this circumcision. The word shenit is used. Again, and the commentators are bothered. What does this mean, shenit, a second time? Again, they didn't circumcise themselves. For me, they circumcised themselves again, second time. So Rashi says it's referring to it's a second mass circumcision. When was the first mass circumcision? By the original Korban Pesach. If we're there by the original Korban Pesach, they had to circumcise themselves first, because most of the Jews didn't circumcise themselves in the desert, in Egypt, and then they brought the Korban Pesach. So that was the first mass circumcision and the first Korban Pesach. Here we have the first Korban Pesach in Eretz Yisrael, and before that there had to be a mass circumcision. So we have two events of mass circumcision. One, the original Exodus, the second, the coming into the land. The question, though, must be presented: why didn't they bring the Korban Pesach during the desert? If all of a sudden they had to feel circumcised because they had to bring Korban Pesach, well, didn't they have the obligation to bring the Korban Pesach throughout the desert experience? It's a variety of questions, that one, but most people do hold, Rashi says, actually, if you look in Chumash, that they only brought the Korban Pesach, the original Korban Pesach, they brought the Korban Pesach only once in the desert experience, mentioned in Parshas Bahalocha, where we learn the laws of Pesach Sheni at the second Pesach in Yar, and this is the first Korban Pesach coming into the land. So why didn't they bring a Korban Pesach in the desert? So there's different answers, but Tosfos in Kedushin makes an interesting point. It says the actual obligation of Korban Pesach, our obligation of Korban Pesach, the continuing legal obligation of Korban Pesach, the mitzvah, as we know it coming out of the Taryag mitzvah of Torah, only started once the Jews settled in Eretz Yisrael. The Korban Pesach that existed before the actual settlement in Eretz Yisrael, which happens at the end of the book of Yoshua, are all special commandments from God for specific moments. The original Korban Pesach in Egypt, the Korban Pesach in Balocha, that was a special Al Pi Adibur, special commandment of God, bring Korban Pesach, and now they had this new commandment of God, specifically when it came into Eretz Yisrael, to bring another Korban Pesach, thus necessitating at this point in time the mass circumcision. But according to Tosfos, a very interesting idea. We have that there's these three special Korban Pesachs, which really reflect the concept of the Exodus. The Exodus began with Yetziat Mitzrayim, with the leaving of Egypt. It continued with the learning of Torah, with the year that they spent in the Midbar, accepting and being involved in Torah, where they were camped around Har Sinai. And then, during the next 40 years, it was a difficult time, because they stayed in the desert not as part of the process of Exodus, but because of the sin of the Meraglim, the sin of the spies. But then, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, that was the third part of the Exodus, because one of the words of the Exodus was V'heveti, I will bring you into the land. And therefore, that Korban Pesach that happened when they went to the land was actually part of the whole Exodus experience. The Exodus is not just leaving Egypt. The Exodus is creating a Jewish state, a Jewish community, a Jewish society in the Jewish land. That's the ultimate goal of the Exodus. And that is perhaps what the Korban Pesach in Yeshua represents. It wasn't just commemoration of the Exodus of Yetziat Mitzrayim. It was another aspect, another mark of the continuation of Yetziat Mitzrayim to the eventual process that concluded with the division of land and the settlement of land by the people of Israel.